Welcome to Nothing Without Us, stories and discussions about meaningful inclusion. We will talk about accessibility, true inclusion, and disability justice with stories, policy updates, discussions, and related commentary on the value of being accessible and inclusive. We believe life should be accessible for everyone, and everyone should be included in all aspects of life. I am your host, Annette Bourbonnier. I am a 70-ish-year-old woman with short gray hair and eyeglasses. I am sitting in a power wheelchair, and my service dog Kirby could show himself at some point during the podcast. This podcast is captioned. Please press the subscribe button at any time during the podcast if you have not already done so. It will not cost you anything, but it will help us make this podcast grow. You are also welcome to make comments in the chat and to give us feedback about what you do or do not like. We especially appreciate a thumbs up. Today's show is the third in the Crip the Vote series, where we engage office holders and candidates in discussion of disability issues. I'm honored to welcome Beth Cullen, who is running for a seat on the school committee in the City of Newport, Rhode Island. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you.
It's good to talk with you.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, happy to have you here. So people with disabilities represent between 20 and 25% of the American population, depending on whose statistics you're reading. But it makes us the largest minority in the USA. However, discussion of disability is never included in campaigns or any other public appearances. So this sub-series of the podcast is geared to having people, who hold office or who are running for office, engage you in talking about questions related to disability and what you might be able to offer in this area, okay? So I often see people struggling with the definitions between IDEA, IEP, and Section 504 plans. So these plans are sometimes talked about in disrespectful ways, which we don't want to have happen. So if you can talk about what the plans are, and then let's talk about how we can ensure that at least faculty and staff are respectful about what they mean.
Sure. Again, thank you. It's a great opportunity to talk about this because, it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't come up on the campaign trail very often.
No, it doesn't.
And when we met at the farmer's market and started the conversation, I thought, okay, well, that was about a month ago and I had some time to do some research and to refresh myself. I knew a lot of these terms, but the IDEA, as you suggest, is the federal umbrella.
Right.
So this happened in the 70s where people with disabilities were promised through legislation to have a free and appropriate public education. Now that's sort of an open-ended phrase, but it's a start.
Undefined.
It's a start.
Yes,
and they have amended it on
right.
regularly. I think the last time was in 2004. So that's the umbrella. That's what the school administration has to, the guidelines they must follow. So an IEP is an individual education program. So that means that if a student has been diagnosed or has been, thought to have some sort of a disability, be it physical or emotional or health related, they write up a plan and it has to be followed. And if it isn't followed, the IDEA comes in and there's legal action that can be taken. 504 is completely different. 504 is not regulated by the IDEA Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, but it's to accommodate students who say may need a little extra time to take a test, may need to sit a little closer to the front of the room. And it's written up and it's reviewed every year as well, not under the guidelines of the IDEA, but it's an important tool for kids that may, just need a little extra. Right. I hope I got that all right.
No, that's good. That's good. So I don't know. I know that special education teachers are well versed in that, but what about other teachers and administrators? How is that how good are they at integrating this, and how do we ensure that this is integrated into the overall academic culture?
Well, that's where a school committee person can come in. I think it's been sort of ignored for a long time. My husband and I often, get the popcorn and watch the school committee meetings. That's what we do on Monday night, Tuesday nights. But I never hear much about it, And they bring up the director of special services. Her name is Candace Andrade in Newport, and she, she might give a quick paragraph, but the superintendent kind of gets her off stage quickly because there's other things to talk about in their priorities. A school committee person can bring the community awareness to the forefront, and I'm pretty good at making connections and speaking loudly if I feel as though something as important as this isn't getting the attention it deserves.
Good. Well, that's going to be important. We count on voices. We really do.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But you asked me about staff.
Yes.
And I just found out by looking at the school site that they are looking for 12 special ed paras for this coming year. I don't know if they've hired any. I think the listing went up in July. So it's very hard to find people. And I don't know if you've had experience with that, but I was shocked to know that they need 12.
Oh, okay, so I'm not shocked at that. I did at one time, a number of years ago, work with someone who wanted to become, a para educator, I guess is the term. Yeah. And the test for it and preparation for it is pretty significant. And I'm not sure. I mean, I've worked with some students in different school systems because I used to train on some of the accommodations, some of the technology accommodations. And I met a number of them, and when I saw what the testing requirements were, it seemed like an overkill on what the job was. And I could be mistaken, it could be just in those cases I was working with. But I don't know if there should be
thresholds too high.
Well, it's I guess we can never really overqualify people for the job. On the other hand, the training should be able to fit the job as it pertains to them, because a paraeducator is usually working with one student. Or a very small group in some situations, but overall these were all working with one student, and the need was different from what when I saw the test I was there like, oh wow, that's
perhaps there is something that a school committee member could help encourage an administrator to maybe differentiate. And not just have 12 cookie cutter applications.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's something to think about.
Well, this is true. I mean, when we look at education, and I don't remember where I saw this particular meme, but we have a habit of testing fish on how well they climb a tree. Because we expect everybody else to climb a tree.
Right. One size fits all. Why can't you climb that tree?
And education isn't that way.
Right, because we're all different.
Yes, right. So I don't remember where I saw that meme, but it stuck with me because
makes sense.
It's very much the case, right?
So community awareness, budgetary awareness, asking questions. I don't think enough of the elected officials are engaged in this subject.
I think there's really a need to educate the masses anyway.
There you go.
Because people still look at disability. People with disabilities can't do anything. And I'm not even going to go with all the things that have been said to me about that. And I'm like, whoa, I'll think this one over. Sometimes I have so much bleeding in my mouth from biting my tongue. But that one, the idea that people can't do anything, and two, that every time they accommodate us, that they look at it as a cost. And there's almost no time that you make an accommodation for us, that it doesn't also benefit someone else. Early in the days of the ADA, people actually said to me, "Thank you," and I said, "Well, what did I do?" They were pushing baby carriages, and they said, "These curb cuts have saved my life. I struggled so badly with my last child, and this is just so much easier." Because you make it more accessible for us, you make it more accessible for everyone
The
else.
elevator at City Hall, you were instrumental in that, I'm sure.
Well, we don't need to.
we won't go back there, but thank you.
But, you know, these things, though, are important. The other thing that people don't think about is that it's an investment more than a cost. And so when you're looking even at budgetary things, if you invest in someone with a disability who then goes on to employment and helping others, first of all, they very likely have a very resourceful employee, because people with disabilities, in order to survive, we have to be resourceful.
Yes.
So these people are resourceful, but they're also dedicated, and they're making money, paying taxes, buying goods and services. This sounds like an economic driver to me,
yeah.
rather than just a cost, where people think of it as sinking a bunch of dollars into a hole, and it's not that at all. And we need to really start thinking in a different way.
We do, and we have to start earlier.
Right.
Many of the people that I had a conversation with, preparing for today's conversation, who had kids in the system, that was the one thread that they told me they wished could be improved upon, is life skills earlier.
Yeah.
And a sense of relevancy in what they're learning to their specific ability, disability, however you'd like to say it, but their skills and their talents.
Right. I don't know if you're aware that there is even a young man, well, I don't know how old he is now, and I don't know if he's still there, but has Down syndrome and was teaching at the University of Syracuse in the Disability Studies program.
Wonderful.
He had a certificate in Disability Studies and was teaching that.
Yeah.
So, you know, people have skills.
It's the perspective that they bring to the classroom.
Absolutely.
That's important. And
Yes.
we had talked earlier about occupations that people that say are on the autism spectrum.
Right. That's it. Wow.
They did some research on that, and my husband, who used to work for IBM, helped me with this. He said, "Oh my goodness, you know, they have these skill sets that are logical thinking, pattern recognition." I wrote some of them down: attention to detail, process orientation. All these things add up to coding, programming, cybersecurity, boom, boom.
Economics.
Yeah, graphic design, attention to detail.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's, you know, they just have this deep, and I'm talking in general terms, which is never fair, but sort of a deep concentration.
Right, and the range is this wide for the autism spectrum. It is significantly wide, so you cannot, it is a spectrum, and the range of abilities is the same as anyone else's. I think that they have a more focused piece of their range is what, and that's not necessarily across the board, but many of them have a very focused piece of their abilities that makes it.
And the logic, the step by step, that they're able to follow these patterns, which is so important in programming and coding. That's the key to success, and it's just a gift. And I think schools, K-12, need to figure that out and start working with them much earlier. Kids that have those abilities. I mean, that's just one subset.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's true. Another important question that needs to get addressed is the intersectionality between students with disabilities and students of color. And you know, students with learning disabilities, very often if they're, you know, a black student with a learning disability, especially black boys with learning disabilities, they get left behind. It's like they're written off, and the assumption is they're not going to do better.
Right.
And I've, you know, teaching on the college level, I've seen that that's not necessarily the case at all.
Sure.
but I have seen the effects of writing them off and what kind of challenges it presents long term. So,
well, yes, and there's a spectrum of that I was looking into that talks about how often they may not get the IEP or the 504, but teachers are sending them for behavioral issues, and those behavioral issues are not, you don't need a 504 or an IEP. You need to have staff, teachers who are aware of what is causing that child's misbehavior. But they put them in a pot, they put them in one category, and that's not, they may not be able to read, not because they have dyslexia, but because they weren't given the appropriate foundational skills early on.
Right.
So we have to be aware of that.
Right.
Also, in my research, I don't know if you follow the Kids Count Fact Book. It's a book that comes out every year that Rhode Island puts together. I think it's national, but in Rhode Island, with all this data. But
Right.
they had a chart of all the towns and cities in Rhode Island and broken down by nationality, by race. Hispanic kids are 30% more likely to get an IEP or a 504. And again, it's not because they have a disability, it's because they have a language problem.
Right.
So because our funding is so tight, the teachers know this child needs help, so they put them in that category, which I think that's unfortunate.
Right. Oh, I agree. We need to really look how we categorize and pigeonhole kids. There's also, and there's a startling statistic. Okay, so I said I'm an economist, and one of the things I study is disability and the economics of disability. And so the University of New Hampshire every year puts out a compendium of disability statistics. And in last year, the one very startling statistic is that students of color with a disability are 360% more likely to be incarcerated in their future.
Exactly, I saw that statistic as well.
So that investment when they're younger pays off.
Big time.
Big time. And we have to really
for a lifetime.
We have to look at that long term
Yeah.
because that affects one cost of keeping somebody. But if you've prevented it, you've got instead somebody who is living a meaningful, productive life as opposed to having no life and
being a burden on society in jail.
So we really need to look at these things not as we're helping you, we're investing in you, and when you change that outlook, so
definitely. And I think there are ways that we can work with the community. I was trying to think, well, I'm just a candidate, I don't have any power to do this, but I have hope. I have hope that your listeners will maybe go to my website, bethcullen.com, and learn more about me and contact me, plug. But I was thinking about how can we connect, and this is another thing some of the parents brought up to me, that there are so many opportunities for the children in the community, but they're not being connected. For example, and somebody else brought this up, and we're sitting at the King House Senior Center. Wouldn't it be great if some seniors that had some extra time would go to Pell and sit with the kids and maybe take a small group and read with the kids and while the teacher's doing a whole class? Nonprofits, there's so many in town. We need to start connecting those. We talk about One Newport, but I don't see those connections actually happen.
One Newport.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. It is a slogan that's used a lot, but I haven't seen the tentacles really reach the bottom.
Right. Yeah, well, somebody can start such a program.
Exactly.
I mean, I know that there have been foster grandparent programs and stuff like that, and that's, it is building the connections, bringing people together.
And the before and after, the in-school learning and the after-school learning. I know Governor McKee has really promoted something called Learn 365, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's to get the after-school programs working with the teachers, so the whole community is promoting academic achievement. It's something that has needed to happen for a long time. So make sure that, but all of this takes extra time, planning and prioritizing. And I think the first thing, and you and I talked about this, that they're going to say is we don't have money for that. We don't have funding for that.
And you have to look at it as an investment, not a cost.
Right.
And once you do that, you can find things. You can find grants. You can find ways of making that happen. And we have to for the future of our kids, but our country, our society as a whole.
No, without doubt.
Right.
So, we have people like you that could go in and talk to kids and give them encouragement. That's what it's all about. They can't be what they can't see.
Right. Exactly. You're right about that. That's for sure. So, another question. There are students with disabilities that do not fall under the IEPs and 504 plans, people with mobility disabilities, sensory disabilities,
Sensory is a big one.
are, and where do you see, bringing them into the picture, access to facilities and buildings in Newport, I know is really difficult. How is it in, the schools itself? I guess the Pell School should be all set at this point.
I would say that's
And
probably the most
Thompson
accessible.
probably
Thompson,
not so much.
it is. I mean, I was involved when they built it in 2001. I was the vice president of the Newport Public Education Foundation, so I was very hands-on in the planning of that. And they took a lot of time with the ramp and with the elevators, but they're only as good as if they work. So, the elevator's often out of commission. The ramp has a big crack in it.
Things that sounds safe.
Things like that. So I am not sure about the new high school. I have no idea.
I really hope it is, because the old one was not accessible for sure. And, that's a big problem too. But, you've been at the STEAM Academy.
My husband and I and many other wonderful people in town, 12 years ago started this, before it was a national movement.
Well, how do we get these children with learning disabilities or physical disabilities, get them into the STEM fields? There is a need, and what a difference they can make if they get there. And so how do we move that forward?
The STEAM, quick definition. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. So we see that as high school and college, but pre-K to 8, to us, is STEAM, because it's all about the integration of content areas.
Right.
So music, dance, patterns in biomimicry, all these things are math-based, but they're fun and beautiful, and kids aren't getting a worksheet that makes them do, addition and subtraction. They're actually seeing how math is all around them. Right. So the integration, the interdisciplinary integration, I see that as where we can help the kids with disabilities see where they fit in to the, it's sort of like the world as one, where science and art feed off of each other. Art is dimension and perspective. That's all math. So it's talking about it.
Sports.
Exactly.
Physics, geometry.
Geography, where are they going? Where's that stadium? So there's so much that can be done. So we really, really hope that eventually we will be able to get the school system to think more holistically about all content areas and get them out of their silos. And then technology comes into that. And we haven't really talked about that, but in some of my looking around in preparation for today, there are so many new tools that are coming online for people with disabilities of all types. And we need to get the teachers aware of it, so professional development is important.
Yes.
But also the administrators and the policymakers, so they can prioritize that.
And we have to, as not the young kids, really think about our relationship with technology. When we're working with kids.
Yes.
But we have to, see, well, where are they at? And how is this working? And how do we make that, use it for them?
Right, and a lot of people, and I've had this experience more times than I'd like to admit, think of me as the technology lady and that technology is bad for little kids. So, it's hard to explain if they've already had that mindset, but technology is just another tool in learning,
Right.
but you're still going to hold a pen and you're still going to form your letters because studies show that's how kids learn to read, by the actual physical touching of the paper and the pen. But there are technology tools that can teach them phonics, that can, make it come alive to them. So it's a combination of all of the above. But we can't be afraid of technology. We've got the world in our palm of our hands now.
Right. I mean, I remember when the idea of, using a calculator, well, we didn't have calculators.
No, we did. Well, we had slide rules and punch cards.
I remember those. But even later, the idea of having a calculator in a classroom, where now you're saying, okay, you need to understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
That we can, but why have you focusing on the little things that we make stupid mistakes on?
Right.
As long as you know how it works, do you understand?
And the theory behind it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And there's one resource I like to tell kids in high school about in college. It's Khan Academy.
Oh, love it.
Oh my God, I think it's like the best thing that's ever been
I'm such a
invented.
Geek that the other night I watched a C-SPAN interview with Saul Khan talking about how AI is not to be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of AI because it's going to really help the world in positive ways.
But we need to have the guardrails for it.
Of course, and he talked about that.
That's the thing.
He's a happy warrior, Saul Khan.
Oh,
he really is.
I love him. I think he's great. I think he's great.
But we can't be afraid of technology, and it is a tool, and I don't know how to get the teachers to understand. They don't have time to learn all this stuff. That's the other. We haven't really talked about that, but they're restructuring the school system right now, and it's going to be a challenge for the teachers in the first few months of
Well,
the year.
that I think though is an issue of professional development, and learning new ways to address the old problems is better than refreshing your old ways to address new problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important part of professional development.
Mm-hmm. We seem to be, what is the definition of insanity?
Yes.
There's a lot of
the same thing over and over again and expecting a
with a different
result.
label, but it's the same soup.
It is the same soup. And the world around us has changed, and we need to be ready to meet that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I saw an interview recently with Mark Cuban.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's another happy warrior in the IT fields.
Definitely, and in healthcare and some other areas too. Mm-hmm. And the interview, he was asked, like, why are you approaching this differently from all these other high-tech billionaires that are, and he said, he said, I realized that we have to answer to Gen Z. And he said, those are my kids. He said, Gen Z kids are kinder, gentler kids than we grew up as. Mm-hmm. So, we want to be respected by them. And so we need to do things. They've learned technology, they've lived this stuff.
They're natives, we're immigrants.
Right. And so we need to be able to integrate that into our lives too. We need to adopt that and adapt it. Mm-hmm. And there's another whole show I could do on some of the things he's been doing, but that is the what makes him do it. Mm-hmm. Is realizing that the younger kids growing up, they're our future, and we need to have them ready for our future.
Right, and we need to meet them where they come into the classroom, and phones have always been part of their lives, so that's an issue that we have to grapple with.
Right.
Yeah, we have to respect that.
Right, and it's a challenge in the school setting.
Yeah, they don't need them during the class time, unless they're going to use them in the project.
Right. What I ended up, it's a separate thing, we don't need to get into it.
We could talk about a lot
but
of things.
But there are, because that's, but yeah, we need to, and we need to teach them to respect its use.
Right.
Okay, so during this time, this is not being used. And, but maybe giving them some opportunities to use it.
It's a research.
Maybe during a class
it's an
discussion
amazing
or
research
something.
tool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because we have a lot of people in the education field that are just, excuse me, I don't do technology. Well, what about the kid who, as you say, is the future? We have to incorporate it in.
We do.
Yeah, so
right.
it's a challenge, but
Yeah.
I'll be talking about it.
Well, we're learning new things.
Yes,
Believe
here
me,
we
this
are.
is all new technology for
Exactly.
me, but I needed to get my message out, so
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
what I'm doing. So, you know, I really do you have any other issues that affect students, you know, students with disabilities?
We haven't
that you wanna
talked a
bring?
lot about this, and this was another thing that came to me when I was speaking to friends with kids who had gone through the system. And this is an add-on, and I have a suggestion for you. The parents really need to be taken in as partners and valued for that, for
Right.
being a partner in the whole process of helping that child reach
Right.
its goals and the child reach their goals and know their abilities and their
Yeah.
you know, their skills. But I think that these IEP meetings and the 504 meetings can sometimes be full of jargon. You know, educators are really
Just
good
like
at
throwing out IDEA, IEP,
Exactly.
504.
all these
well,
acronyms,
wait a
and the
minute,
parents
my
are,
kid needs
yeah.
this.
and they're nervous, and they just
may
want the
not
best
have-
for their kid.
They may not have had the background.
Oh,
and, you know,
They may be from a foreign country, and they're just trying to
Right.
learn the language, and they're getting all this. So the good news is, and I don't know if you've heard about this, and in my research it popped up. Our state representative Lauren Carson, and our state from Newport, and Terry Cortrine from Portsmouth, they put in a bill this year that passed the Senate, didn't pass the House, and the gist was they want an independent advocate available to the families to go into these meetings.
that makes sense.
And also Spanish speaking. It didn't pass, you know, when they
Yeah.
finished their session this June
There's
or
a few
July.
things that I was disappointed didn't pass.
But the good news is, and I'm happy that this happened, the RIDE commissioner, Dr. Alfonte Green, she saw the value in that. She comes from New York, so a
Yeah.
lot of these things have been going on in more progressive states like New York for years. So she's like, we'll do it. So she made the policy, and it is now available. It is now,
Good.
RIDE, it's on their website.
Good.
So that's good news.
That-
Parents need
Yeah, right,
advocates and champions and
Right.
handholders, and
Right.
it should be an independent person.
right. You're right. You're right about that.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we also need to include mentors with disabilities that are in the colleges and universities. I think that makes a difference. You know, this can be your future. You know, this is your interest. Come, let me show you what we do here.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and appreciate you bringing this to the community. I think the airtime it deserves is happening, you know, for real.
We have to say it for real.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I thank you.
You know, so, you know, thank you so much, you know, for joining me today. You know, people with disabilities need to have our voices heard, and I thank you for listening to that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for listening. I'm Annette Bourbonnier from Nothing Without Us, stories and discussions of meaningful inclusion. Please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We appreciate comments. Tell us who you want to hear from, what you want to hear about. I'll be happy to forward any questions you send me to Beth if they're...
VoteBethCullen.com, Annette.
Okay, you can say that for sure.
VoteBethCullen.com.
All right. So make sure you check out the interview with Congressman Magazino that got posted last week. We will also be talking with Congressman Amo next week. So tell your friends about us so we can grow. You can find us on patreon.com and on YouTube, and you can follow me on LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads.
You are connected.
Remember that our democracy depends on everyone getting out and voting. You can't complain about the results unless you do. So until the next Nothing Without Us, I'm Annette Bourbonnier.